I've been sitting on this one for a while, about 2 years. Given my track record and recent videos, you might not have seen this one coming from me. When I was cleaning my overstuffed video idea folder, I found this one. Just one line. The masses yearn for Titanfall. And rightfully so. But even 2 years ago was too little too late for this essay. This wasn't even supposed to be that long to begin with, and I've rewritten it so many times by now. Furthermore, we're beyond the 10-year anniversary of the first game, which lays pretty dead, and we're encroaching on Titanfall 2's 10-year anniversary in 2026. You think I would be excited to talk about it, but they literally don't make games like this anymore. Titanfall is over, it's done. So this already has a lot going on. 1, it's a documentary of Titanfall, what it is, why it's important, how it failed, and why it's important. 2, it's a love letter mourning one of my favorite series of all time. 3, it's a strong letter of condemnation for Apex Legends and how it basically gutted and replaced Titanfall. If there was anything I could say to summarize this video, it's this. Titanfall laid the groundwork, Apex Legends buried it. What's up? I'm Jake. Follow me for some basic channel updates and unhinged blog posts on Patreon. It's free because I don't have anything else you can buy yet. Oops. In this particular video, I say the word Titanfall 175 times, the word Apex 56 times, and the word furthermore thrice. So I think that's worthy of a like on its own, but you know. We'll see. Titanfall is a big deal, not only in the impact it's made on gaming as a whole, but also for the ways in which it's been handled, or mishandled past its prime. The first game is basically on a razor's edge and it's tipping fast. Servers are empty and you can't even buy it anymore. The second game is just living in the shadow of its former glory, with its thin yet loyal fanbase being the only thing keeping it together. If you're a veteran, then I hope to do these games right. Though if you really know everything I'm about to talk about and you're as up to date, then you can just skip ahead to the My Feelings chapter. If you've never played, you might ask, why do people like me care so much about these games? Well baby, I'll show you. Let's talk about it. Titanfall. Titanfall 1 is, no bars held, one of the best feeling first-person shooter games I've ever played. I believe I say this at the end too, but even if Titanfall 2 is just the better game, I guess, the first game is still my favorite. I love this game for every single thing it did, and there is a shockingly tiny yet resilient group of core fans that still play it to this day. I was even talking to some of them, and when I mentioned the more popular Titanfall 2, one guy responded, I've never really played it. This guy was practically max level. That's how much people loved this game in particular. Both games are phenomenal as a pair, but they're unique enough on their own to set themselves apart from each other. I'll try not to repeat stuff a lot of you veterans are already aware of, but I believe I need to break down some things about the original Titanfall in order for everyone to see this game from my point of view. It's been a long 11 years since its release. It's been beaten and broken so many times that you can't even buy it. I had to look up how to play Titanfall 1 2025 Reddit. I'm not sure why the music got louder. You can still get it if you search 2025 Titanfall 1 Reddit. Huh, it did it again. Anyway, it's only a matter of time before this game vanishes completely, and I'm too stubborn to let it go, because this game is beautiful and I love it so much. So bear with me as I pay respects to one of my favorite games of all time. To give you some background info, and I'll be brief, these two guys, Jason West and Vince Zampella, were formerly part of the game development studio Infinity Ward. This was the company that invented Call of Duty, and they released every game up until COD 4 Modern Warfare before some intercompany struggles arose and both Vince and Jason were kicked out. So what do? They start a new games studio, Respawn Entertainment, in 2010, and what they sought to do was usurp the very thing they created. They wanted to take the online first-person shooter and elevate it beyond what it already was. They were willing to be a little more abstract, but still have a clear vision and see it through as best they could. Thus, in 2013 at Microsoft's E3 set, Respawn announces Titanfall. Now, this game was positioned to be the next era of online shooter, a game that would set itself apart from all others like it, but one that would achieve this through clever innovation and a decently high standard for quality. And judging purely from the trailers I'm showing, the idea was prominent. This would be like nothing you've ever seen. Not like Halo, not like Gears of War, I know that's not an FPS, not like COD, but better, or as better as it was allowed to be. You see, the entire point of this game was to innovate on a formulaic level. Sure, It's still a first-person shooter. It's not worlds apart from what folks were already playing at the time. But it took that foundation and built upward. And the way in which it built was profound. But it was never quite repeated in any games to come, making it quite literally one of a kind. First and foremost, there was the decision to take basic FPS movement and implement little gimmicks like wall running or the double jump. Nothing crazy or over the top. The movement otherwise was basically what you'd expect from an FPS game. We weren't on to Titanfall 2 yet, we had to start slow. But the movement mechanics themselves would become basic, built-in tools for navigating the world. They created the Titans, gave them their own unique roles, and worked them in. So then they built these gorgeous maps with plenty of surface area, parkour potential, and a variety of open and enclosed areas for the Titans and pilots to respectively roam. They built these maps with movement in mind, particularly in how you would maintain momentum and keep chaining actions. On the 5th day, they threaded the flashy concept art into the fabric. On day 6, they created all of these avant-garde weapons for you to play with. And on the 7th day, God looked upon his creation and said, "It is good." You get where I'm going with this. Yes, it's flashy, it innovated, it did all sorts of things. But I spun it this way because I want to consider how and why it came together like it did. You can shake up certain mechanics of a game that wouldn't have seen them otherwise, and I still wouldn't quite call it innovation. So we take it a few steps further. This game took an online-only approach to its gameplay. That's not an argument in innovation, I'm getting to that. While online-only is a move many more nowadays, I think the developer knew going into this that the game would have a limited lifetime. Like, they were going to make it great and do as much with it as possible, but I think it might have also been seen as an experiment on if they can really do this. So it felt safe, per se, to just run an online shooter game and make sure you do a really good fucking job at being an online shooter game. Akin to the trailers, each match was supposed to make an impact. They wanted them to feel like large-scale battles, with a lot of constant action in the background. And foreground, to be fair. It had to be interesting, with minimal room for sheer repetition and boredom. To kick things up a notch, they implemented AI-controlled enemies, constantly being funneled into the action. So not only was there this player versus player element, there was this element of chaos as separate parts, namely called PvEVP, or player versus enemy versus player, that comes into play. Even having a Titan roam around in AI mode as it follows you while you do pilot things leans into the chaos of having enemy AI on the field. Additionally, as far as I'm aware, there is a feature unique to Titanfall as a series, a legitimate evacuation phase at the end of every mission where the losing team must make it to the ship while the winning team tries to kill them. There is a lot of dialogue and communications constantly coming in from the beginning to the end of the match that just maintains immersion. And then there's this element of pilot versus Titan play completely differently. So you're running around doing more traditional things as a pilot, but when you get into your Titan, it's completely different. It's like an improvement of the score streak system from Call of Duty. Good gameplay was rewarded with a Titan, then that becomes your chance to go batshit crazy on everyone. But because everyone has access to a Titan, this becomes balanced. Now you're going toe-to-toe with enemy Titans. Now there are other pilots hiding in small buildings trying to gun you down with anti-Titan weapons, like the Sidewinder missile launcher or the Archer rocket launcher. Some of those pilots are attempting to rodeo your Titan so they can get it off the field a little bit faster, and the only answer, unless you have electric smoke, is to jump out and shoot them off. The design philosophy of playing a Titan versus a pilot were completely separate, but they had considerable overlap with how they interacted with each other. Similarly, you were swapping between these two completely different playstyles on the fly. To elaborate on this, the class customization allows you to pick and choose just how you will play your Titan and pilot respectively. It introduced features like the cloak and the stim, which were major abilities you'd use in the field. It threw down tons of weapons for different playstyles that were designed to fit the game's futuristic flashiness, while at the same time being gritty and real enough to feel like it makes sense. The smart pistol practically aims for you, but you have to be close enough to use it and wait for it to lock onto a target. The EVA 8 shotgun packed a heavy punch up close with a lot of range to boot, but it was still a shotgun. The Car SMG, the Longbow DMR, the Wingman Revolver, these are just a handful of guns that were so well designed out of this one experimental game that they appeared in the sequel, and they appeared in a different non-Titanfall game that's really popular today. To add, the Titans themselves received roles and classifications, typically resembling a light, medium, and heavyweight mech frame. Their guns were interchangeable, shout out to the quad rockets and the arc cannon. There were even different voices and languages you can buy for your Titan's AI.
Achtung, Sie sind 2:1 in Caution, you are outnumbered 2-1.
AI mode起動完了. Задействован режим ИИ.
There were just loads of ways to customize a Titan, but they all played completely disjointed from piloting. No more parkour, you're deadly and you're deterring, but you're also slow and a rather large target. That's not even all of the basic features. To just add some salt, some flavor to all the chaos that goes on, Respawn added a mechanic called the burn cards, a mechanic of which was only ever seen in Titanfall 1 and maybe the one mobile game that actually did launch. These would be unlockable by simply leveling up and playing the game. And these would basically change one thing about your loadout in a significant way. You could get a longbow DMR with a sonar scope, a juiced up R101. You could go invisible indefinitely, you'd get better rockets on a Titan, whatever. You could bring 3 cards into a match and activate them as you saw fit. Their effects ended when you died, so it definitely enhanced this sense of risk and reward that was already present at the hands of everything else I've already talked about. Ooh, foreshadowing. Kind of like Chekhov's gun. Before I go on, I need to take a moment to appreciate the visual aesthetic that Titanfall was going for, because someday we won't even have this anymore. I don't know if you've seen the concept art, but there was an apparent vision that the art team was going for. This vision is clear in the maps themselves. To start, no matter where you look, you will see that these are highly and intricately detailed environments. The graphics themselves, however, are pretty gritty, and some would call it subpar for this day and age, but there's an inherent magic to the original graphics that ages like good wine. It's reminiscent of like Half-Life, Halo 3, Gears of War, and I hesitate to say it because I've been doing nothing but saying it, but fuck it, older Call of Duty. It looks like an early 2010s first-person shooter. Similarly to how I mentioned the weapon design, these environments were quite futuristic, or they were battle-torn, or this or that. There was a visual theme going on that I wouldn't quite call it cyberpunk, but it was like one step behind. Science fiction. And at the very same time, I think the lower quality graphics alongside the ingenious use of a color palette created these very realistic, gritty feelings at the same time. It just makes these maps feel far more grounded. And this is exclusive to Titanfall 1. TF2 didn't exactly fall into this game's footsteps, with a lot of things, not just the art direction. However, the approach to level design was unparalleled. In short, because it's genius. More impressive than just being visually interesting, the maps themselves were engineered with Titanfall's core gameplay in mind. It might be something taken for granted, especially if you've never played and you're just watching the gameplay, but there is legitimate complexity to these maps. There is so much open space, like streets or restaurants, but there's also a lot of hiding places indoors, and there's levels to these buildings, and there's hidey holes to jump down into or to jump up through. So while the Titans might roam about on the ground, pilots are navigating this whole thing. Sweeping hallways, chaining wall runs to get the high ground, all just trying to get a leg up and a jump on everyone else in the lobby. All fighting to keep their ball rolling, so to speak. It was very solo player oriented on a team scale. And the level design was courteous of this. Most things are climbable or mantleable. Strategic corners and set pieces create plenty of blind spots. Most walls were placed strategically enough to encourage the use of wall running. There is already so much going on, so much I've talked about. But when you utilize art and level design of this caliber, then I don't know how much better you can get. It's action-packed, it's thrilling, it's everything I've ever wanted a video game to be. I'll get more into that in the wrap-up discussion at the end. While the inner workings elevated the art direction and map structure, these two things would then go on to completely elevate one of Titanfall's cooler offerings. While Titanfall's online playlist was reminiscent of other games of the era, there was Capture the Flag, a control mode, and then some other side things like Last Titan Standing or Frontier Defense, more on that later, Respawn did something really interesting with the campaign game mode. The footage from here is going to be from Ape Channel, who recorded a full playthrough in the campaign mode while the servers were still alive enough to even get away with it. So thank you so much, Ape Channel. Even if Titanfall was online only, it would still have a story mode, and it didn't have to be much. There wasn't anything to know about Titanfall's story except, here we are in the middle of an intergalactic war between one side called the IMC and the other side called the Militia. So to mimic a traditional shooter campaign, there were a set of missions that just had you play Titanfall. Usually in a control or attrition format, attrition just being the basic form of team deathmatch. But in between, there would be a story-related dialogue that happens before, during, or after the match. There's cinematics to match it. Sometimes you would have to complete an additional objective, and from when you get in to when you get out, there is this enhanced feeling of interest as you realize that this story is playing out. And because it's PvP, that means that both the IMC and the Militia, who were fighting each other, are made up of real people. It's easy to feel like you're really fighting for something. It made what was already a pretty significant and memorable game of Titanfall feel that much more important. I remember very specifically the Battle of Demeter, I think it was like the second to last quote-unquote campaign mission in the 9-mission series, and it ended with, you know what, I'll just show you.
Get to your ship and get out of there.
Marcus, I've got the reactor set to pulse detonate, and all the coolant in the system isn't gonna save this place anymore.
All ships, the core is going critical. Lock in your jump coordinates and prepare the evac crews.
Marcus, they trusted me as an ex-IMC officer, and they're gonna need someone after I'm gone. You told me 15 years ago, on board the Odyssey, to take the ship. Now I'm giving you the same choice. Pilot, this is McAllen. If you're still on the ground out there, it's been an honor serving with you.
On the frontier today, the IMC's port of Demeter was attacked by militia insurgents.
This guy set off a nuclear reaction and the subsequent explosion would kill everyone and end the match. That was pretty significant because you usually have the losing team trying to leave in the escape shuttle, and that just didn't happen on this one. And the first time the explosion wiped us out, I remember thinking, holy shit, no one got out of there. Every single thing I've spent the last 17 or so minutes talking about just comes together in this beautiful, nearly perfect mess of tension and chaos. These things come together to create just the foundation for Titanfall's core gameplay. It was and still is like nothing I've ever seen. Even the second game isn't a suitable replacement for the first. This was a game that knew what it wanted to be and it did it very well. There was so much more to love about the experience of just one Titanfall match than there is in almost any other game I've ever played. What this game brings to the table in terms of make me feel something was unfathomable in its approach. This game was a miracle. And like I said, it wasn't a world apart from the other first-person shooters, but it knew what it wanted to do differently and ensured that it was going to do it right. Pound for pound, Titanfall is a game that carries its weight. Of course, that's how I see it, because I love this game. It's a pretty extraordinary title, but even I'll admit it takes a special kind of person to see this as flawless despite some of its flaws. That special person is me. Hi. I scared you in Waffle House? I remember reading a Game Informer magazine as a kid, around when the game came out, and I read about how some critics struggled to see it as more than just a Call of Duty with robots. And I mean, that's pretty fair. Coming from the guys that even invented Call of Duty in the first place, what more could you expect? But I remember feeling like I couldn't really sympathize with that, at least not in that age. Of course, I played COD at my friends' houses, and I grew up on Halo, but I didn't really know what that meant. Because for me, this was way cooler in practice than Call of Duty. And I've played so much COD in the last 10 years that I can say extremely definitively, even with Black Ops 6, I have way more fun playing Titanfall. If I'm lucky enough to even find a match, I'm gonna stick out until I leave, or until everyone needs to leave. I'm sorry, I'll be that guy, but this is way better than Call of Duty. This is still way better than anything I've ever played, and now on the precipice of its own death, I'll be here playing it until I can't. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm kind of saving that stuff for the end. But now that I've mentioned the game's current state, I think it's safe to say that Titanfall unfortunately suffered from just a lot that was out of its control. The game was kind of pushed along as an Xbox seller, coming along the Xbox One's launch window. However, its limited content at launch and its Microsoft exclusivity didn't really help it when it came to player retention. Sure, we got some crazy DLC map packs and Frontier Defense, but it just didn't really have a long leg up on the Xbox One, even if Microsoft was kind of banking on the game's success. The problem was, in an era where games like Halo or Gears of War were already well established and thriving, Microsoft and, hey, even everyone wanted Titanfall to do great. And it did do great, but they didn't really need it to do great, per se. They didn't really feel the need to swoop in and save this game if it failed. More on that in the end, but its performance makes sense to me. This was a bit new, it wasn't as established, it was from a new team, and it had to do a lot of work to stand out as the next-gen shooter of the mid-2010s. In other words, as I mentioned previously, it didn't come around with the world's longest shelf life in mind. This game was still a wild success on its own. It sold 7 million units worldwide by October 2015, with over 10 million individual players, all just a year and a half after launch. So it wasn't like this game flopped, it's not like no one knew about it. Not even mentioning the few still playing this game, it was a standout rarity in the video game sphere. There is nothing that does Titanfall quite like Titanfall. However, its commercial success was looked at differently. There was just a serious problem with the game's content at launch. Even after making the DLC free, there just wasn't enough longevity in the game to keep people playing for years and years like they do with Battlefield games. It sold mostly due to impressive marketing and because it's legitimately a good game. But I imagined either EA, or Respawn Entertainment, wanted another titan of a shooter game. One that would beat out this game's numbers and do it a hell of a lot differently. It didn't matter how Titanfall did, or how long it would have lived for, because Titanfall, in actuality, was just a genuine proof of concept, to demonstrate that these guys can do this, that people do like this sort of thing. And so Respawn worked. They studied, they experimented, they took every single thing they learned from Titanfall, and they sought to create something of near perfection. Ladies and friends, may I introduce the game of the hour, a game that needs no introduction, Titanfall 2. The development cycle for Titanfall 2 started pretty early in the first game's lifetime, somewhere in mid-2014, so there was a 2-year development cycle before it came in 2016. According to an article on Game Developer, the development of Titanfall 2 was done much more abstractly than people might have thought about at the time, referencing the so-called action block. The action block was a way to prototype certain new features and mechanics. They would look at the mechanics of the original game and they would let the developers run free. In other words, or even better, in the words of Vince Zampella, quote, "We say don't get attached to this because it might go nowhere, but go make something. Take a week, take a few days to make something fun." End quote. So then Zampella and co would look at these and go, "Oh, this is horrible," or "Wow, this is incredible." And this kind of principle rubbed off very well on Titanfall 2 overall. You could tell basically upon launch that maybe the first game was warm-up, but this one's the real deal. From the menus, which first of all are fucking insane, to the significantly faster pilot movement speed, the time to kill on your weapons being way lower, the pilot and Titan customization options are far more fleshed, more on that later, and the game overall feels very breakneck, very fast, but also very fluid. Like, on first pickup, it's gonna be a little too fast for you, so you really need to take some time to learn more about all of the unique movement mechanics, the weapon types, the classes, you name it. Titanfall 2 blew the first game out of the water in almost, if not every way. And under everything this game has to offer, which I may never be done talking about, the real secret to the sauce exists in the series' first and only single-player story-based campaign, which I will be talking about first. You can skip it if you want, but like, you're already so far in this thing, and if you stay, it should be for the game's campaign. No spoiler warnings ahead, but if you must know, the story itself isn't really all that mind-blowing, and is definitely not even one of the reasons this campaign is so well loved from all reaches of the community. Lord help me, I'm 1.5 beers deep. Alright, Titanfall 2's story mode. The story itself is simple but effective. You play as Jack Cooper, a lowly rifleman thrown into the deep end when his mentor dies and leaves him with a Titan, called BT. The two form a bond and then they try to survive behind enemy lines, caught in the middle of this war between the IMC and the militia. Along the way, you fight elite mercenaries, sabotage enemy plans, and discover the Fold Weapon, a doomsday device capable of wiping entire planets. But Titanfall 2's campaign isn't so notable for the plot. It's more that it's exceptional for the way it plays out. The story itself isn't of bad quality or poor in writing. Not at all. I really liked it. It felt like a lot of the campaigns we've seen in games like Halo 3, which is just to say, it's nothing you've never seen before. Except it's nothing you've ever played before, because Titanfall 2's design philosophy is just that spectacular. Right from the start, this campaign is pure momentum. It teaches you by throwing you into the action. There's no slowing down to hold your hand. It just says, fuck it, you do it. Movement isn't a gimmick, it's survival. Every fight, every chase, every space forces you to master wall running, sliding, and aerial combat until it feels like it's second nature to you. And the maps themselves are insane. The maps aren't really levels, they're playgrounds, pushing you to experiment with movement, to chain jumps into wall runs, into slides, into bunny hops, and even the levels themselves are mind-blowing. Titanfall 2 just constantly reinvents itself. I'll give you 3 examples. First is, you fight your way down a massive assembly line as a factory builds houses. And to be honest, this whole mission might be the most memorable to me in terms of level design. BT gets swept up by a mechanical arm, so you have to run through what is basically an entire building fabrication facility. And this entire time, you're basically watching a home be built from scratch. First the pavement, then the grass is rolled on, then the frame, the interior, the walls. You just spend this entire mission watching it all come together, the same exact kind of building. The buildings and even the factory itself become set pieces in what is otherwise a seriously cleverly designed parkour level, making this one of the most unique missions I've ever played in a video game. At the same time, this mission's boss, Ash, is talking mad shit, so you kind of have to put up with her, but fighting your way to her allows you to see what we've been building too. And before you know it, this giant fabricated arena starts to build, and she makes you fight waves of enemies in a high intensity setting as you use the layout to outpace the enemy. Not performing fast enough will get you killed. Another favorite mission brought you to an abandoned facility, where you literally time travel mid-fight, and that's not just a gimmick, it's a full-blown combat mechanic. This thing was so cool. You have to fight your way through this facility back to BT using the mechanic to swap times, sometimes in rapid succession. Enemies in the past would stay there, so you could swap time, reposition, then swap back to get the kill. This time swap thing, paired with how much better I was at the game by this point, let me be a hell of a lot more aggressive in combat than I even expected myself to be. And in parkour, you have to swap pretty fucking fast sometimes to even pull it off properly. So timing was absolutely the key. I guess this entire mission left me feeling way more impressed than everything from before. I got to use the thing well and often. I'm happy. And the build up here was so monumental as well. You learn at some point that those ruins in the distance was some prototype weapon of alien origin called the Fold, or in other words, just some interesting story stuff. Coming back out to fight in the past or present with BT, you'd see there's a hell of a lot happening on both sides of the fight. Going back and forth felt extremely cinematic. There's just a lot going on at all times, on all sides. This one was just extra pleasing to play through, at least visually. And at the end, when it freezes time right as it blew up, I mean, wow. Holy shit. Another one threw you in the middle of a full-scale Titan battle with Sarah herself that felt like it was right out of a movie. And you do all this crazy shit, it pivots to you raiding this escaping ship, you fly it a little bit, and then you fight Viper and a North Star Titan, which is like one of the most legendary boss fights this campaign has to offer. I won't even elaborate on that. It's just awesome, every step of the way. And then there's your Titan, BT. Some folks liked him for the depth of story stuff. I knew that the story received high praise at the time for its use of dialogue options between you and BT. I know some people really cared about placing emphasis on a pilot and his Titan, but even disregarding that, I find Titanfall 2's story interesting. Interesting yet forgettable. It made me understand why I'm shooting things, it was easy to comprehend, and it had a clear beginning, middle, and end. BT and Cooper's chemistry was prominent, but not really anything super special, save for the dialogue between you two. The plot did its job and not one thing more. But the reason this is a great campaign is everything else. There is a huge amount of polish applied to every single layer of the game as a whole, and the pacing was nothing short of immaculate. The platforming and the variety of levels are awesome. Titan combat was perfectly blended in to break the segments apart. The environmental, level, and art design is just peerless. It's clever, it's fun, it's fast-paced, it's action-packed. Just as you think it would get as repetitive or as boring as I am, it gives you a new way to have fun. Different platforming. It changes up the dynamic. It doesn't rely on the Titan side of things to change up the pacing. This is a high-octane campaign for a high-octane game. But what makes the game feel so good to play? Well, there are two critical components of Titanfall 2's success that I must elaborate on, so that we can unlock the real secret this game carried. These components would be the movement and the level design. Titanfall's movement philosophy is really hard to describe, but once you see it, you get it. The idea is just this constant go, go, go. There are certain mechanics that the game pushes you to take advantage of. Short wall running with long jumps in between gives you a crazy burst of speed. There are several different ways to maintain your momentum. And if you know anything about the multiplayer, I'm sure you've seen all of these crazy old heads that are flying around the map and they're killing you before there's any time for you to react. There's two reasons for that, both of which I'm currently discussing. The movement is only so fluid with a player that understands it on a map that was so carefully crafted. One with consideration for your surroundings, one with options for every kind of situation. That's probably why I adored the campaign so much. It teaches you and it punishes you with the movement and the level design. But to push this idea a little further, the combat mechanics of the original game were dolled up. There are more weapons than ever, more pilot classes, Titan classes, and you're just taking all this from last game and you're making it faster. The combat itself is so swift, yet there's a pace to it. A pace set and designed by the movement philosophy. And you'll quickly see that movement is combat. Simply walking, aiming, and shooting will get you killed. You can move fast, but then if you stop in one place to kill everything, you'll just die because you're a sitting duck. If you don't manage sight lines and angles, you die. Kill nothing, you'll die, so you have to do something. It invites you to think at least one step ahead, to very quickly consider whether or not you need to evade or attack, and how should I do it given the tools at my disposal? How is my ammo? Do I need to reload or swap weapons or wait for a cooldown? Where am I going to run? Am I prepared to shoot? Playing Titanfall, I am thinking about so many different things in rapid fire succession. And I didn't get here because I'm good at the game or because I've been playing this game for so many years. No, I got here because I played the campaign. I was taught to do this stuff, to To put it differently, you're being trained on your reflexes and then you're tested. And each subsequent mission brings with it larger stakes, asking for you to do a little bit more, always pushing you beyond what's comfortable for you. It plays with this ever-tight window of risk and reward in terms of its approach. It forces you to learn in order to progress. Some parkour sections are going to require fast speed and quick thinking and clever timing to get through. Some fights require you to run around, kill a thing or two, and run again. Before you know it, you're going fast, you're killing fast. All the while, the level design does something a little bit differently in each mission. There's a unique feature, there's a new thing going on, there's this, there's that. The sheer amount of not only variety in the different features of the map, but also in the color and the atmosphere makes me very excited to keep going. And this applies to the multiplayer maps, many of which are themed similarly to some of these missions. I like to get my fill of one visual aesthetic and then move on to the next. The balance between looking at the map and legitimately using the map to get around and do Titanfall things was cleverly executed in that it's extraordinarily pleasing both on a visual and a gameplay level. The fact that the placement of walls, buildings, floors, and enemies were so carefully considered makes the movement feel extra special. I never felt that the map held me back or it lacked options. It was just I who was caught lacking. And all the campaign itself really asks of you is to understand the foundation of what the gameplay really is and to build on it. In essence, it just teaches you how to play Titanfall. It gives you the tools and a chance to experience the very many ways in which you can play this. And that's how it is all the way until the end. But ask anyone who plays Titanfall, it feels good to run around like that. It feels good to actually perform. It takes skill to be proficient at this game, and the ceiling for this skill is pretty high, but that's why experience is necessary. That's why the campaign is around. That's why this game has bolstered such a loyal yet dwindling core fan base, because this game is different from anything I've ever played. You know, I say that about both games, but bear with me. This feels really, really good. If I could take these two main ideas of movement and level design to distill what Titanfall really is, everything is built on two words: experience first. Everything in Titanfall revolves around the experience of playing Titanfall. They made damn sure that this game felt good, is good, and even if you don't like the story, it definitely taught you the necessary skills to really play Titanfall 2's multiplayer without becoming helplessly decimated by some Generation 100 pilot with the gamertag Golden Gooner. As it has been years at this point since I've really played Titanfall 2, it felt great to actually relearn my senses of how to be evasive, how to catch people off guard. My reflexes were much better. I found myself being far more aggressive both on the ground and in my Titan to match the pace and intensity that everyone else fell into. All of this, and I realize the story mode is just one long-winded introduction to what Titanfall 2 really was. The experience-oriented, crazy next-gen shooter that we were all promised. So if the campaign was to get you ready, then what are we ready for? The point of which I've been trying to convey is that Titanfall 2 didn't necessarily improve on the first entry as it did transform it altogether. Because everything I discussed about the story's gameplay is the same approach taken in its multiplayer. As a departure from the first game, and I already covered it so I'll keep it short, the pilots are just faster. There are more ways to obtain momentum, and there are more ways to keep it too. Because you're now faster, more ground can be covered in a shorter amount of time. The time to kill a pilot on your weapons has decreased, so like I said, pilot gameplay is more reflex-oriented than ever before. Also, the Titans. They pretty much received a complete overhaul. Gone are the 3 weight classes from before, now Titans fill into a certain role, and all come with a very set-in-stone abilities unique to said roles. Of course, there is a little bit of ability customization to unlock that more or less fine-tunes these abilities. For example, a Tone Titan drops Particle Wall. It shoots a sonar pulse that locks onto nearby Titans, and just by shooting it locks on too. So when you fully lock on, you can use a small Seeking Missile Barrage, so you can play corners, hallways, etc. Differently, the Ronin Titan gets a shotgun. It can phase shift for a brief time, and it swings a sword like fucking crazy. A sword on a Titan. The Ion's abilities are shared between a pool of energy, and there's things you can do with that. Monarch Titan, notably similar in style to BT, is much different. It's built for longer term survival, but requires proficient understanding of Titan combat to achieve said survival. Its core ability instead grants a permanent upgrade to one of its regular abilities, rather than just being a one-time use big attack like the other Titans have. Also, you can humiliate other Titans by stealing their batteries in an execution, which reminds me, they all have different customizable executions that can be unlocked and used on other Titans, and the pilots have the same thing. So there is a hell of a lot more going on than in the first. However, you can't do certain things that you could do in the first, like you can't swap out weapons or abilities on the Titans. There aren't any OS voice customizations options like there were, which is just weird, but okay. Even these guys have more refined movement and use cases that weren't as present in the first. The Titan mechanic itself was based off the first games, but it doesn't really resemble it more than it just took what they made and they did it differently. So being different and leaning into the class role aspect was a bit controversial, but as I'll discuss, it's ultimately better for gameplay. Now that Titans have defined roles, pilots are faster than ever, and the series itself seems to have experienced an overhaul. The real question is, what does this do to the game as a whole? Well, as I touched on, TF2 seems to take an experience-first approach to its gameplay. And what it really comes down to is pacing. It takes the same basic flow, pilot combat, Titan combat, switch between those for a while, then we turn up the heat. Similarly to the first, the matches in Titanfall 2 are large-scale battles. You get the same grunts and specters from before. AI-controlled Reapers show up a little bit later in the match as it heats up, everyone's got a Titan with its own defined role, and pilots have a few more ways to interrupt the Titans, including... oh, grenades recharge now. Cool. Arc grenade spam. Also, rodeoing a Titan is much different. You ride them to take a battery, which hurts them and it gives you a little shield to charge your own, or another ally's Titan. There are just far more ways to play, and in the heat of the battle, everyone kinda does their own thing, and their own playstyles with their own tools, trying to get a leg up on everyone else until we get into the endgame movements, such as evacuations, last stands, etc. But the pacing is not consistent, nor is it predictable. It's more moment to moment than anything else. Why is that? It's dictated by customization. What I think TF2 did expertly was expand the sandbox of the first with a taste of perfection. Pilot customization was broadly enlarged. There are far more weapons than the first, far more weapon types. Some make a return, like the Car SMG, the Longbow, and the Kraber. Some weapons saw a shift from their roles prior. The Smart Pistol is now a score streak, for lack of a better term. The Sidewinder is no longer an anti-Titan weapon exclusively, it's actually a primary that you can carry around at all times. This is one of my favorite primaries in the entire game. It doesn't do as much damage to Titans as it did in the first, but it tends to do far more than any other primary type, and it's kind of crazy to kill someone with that. It's just a spray and pray missile launcher. It's perfect for me. Even the guns that were new to Titanfall 2 were good enough to set themselves apart and distinguish themselves as guns from Titanfall 2. I used to use the double take back in the day, a sniper rifle that doesn't one-shot, and the shots themselves are projectile, meaning you have to aim for where they will be, not where they are. Of course, I'm no good with it nowadays, but I captured footage on my old Xbox account just to show off this gun's Generation 2 status. It really is a skilled weapon that takes experience and frustration to handle, capable of a bit more versatility and freedom than the Kraber or the Longbow DMR options. Similarly, new anti-Titan weapons stood out from the crowd too. The Thunderbolt is a fan favorite, kind of like a Titan fly swatter if I'm being honest. It doesn't lock on or notify other Titans of your fire, but it also draws a straight line back to the window you're hiding in, so there's more, or I guess, alternative elements of risk. The pilots themselves have more class options too, and these can be combined with the weapons and the playstyle you're going for. For example, we have the same cloaking and stemming options, but now there's a grapple mechanic, making parkour and map traversal much more straightforward than it would have been otherwise. There's a sonar pulse blade, which reveals enemies in the area, and pairs well with basically anything, but particularly shotguns in hallways. Phase shift, which I mentioned with the Ronin Titan, allows you to evade fire by traveling to an altered dimension for just a few seconds. There is already so much going on. But all of these things I've discussed, Titan roles, pilot roles, weapons changes, they all contribute to the pace of a single Titanfall match, as well as the constant risk/reward gambit being cast by every single player. What do I mean? If there were 100 different playstyles and roles you could lean towards in the first Titanfall, there are now 100 times more. If I use a sniper and grapple, I'll probably be moving around the map and hoping to get a good shot on someone who doesn't suspect it, but swinging around with a ranged weapon tends to make me an easy to spot and easy to kill target. So I have to play with consideration for everyone else, where they are and what they're doing. Similarly, my Sidewinder build is more anti-Titan. I use a particle wall to amp my damage, try to set up where they can't easily reach me, and I just bug the shit out of them. But by doing this, I set myself up as a target for the Titans, and usually I find out just how easy I made it for them to get me. In other words, there's a balance struck by each and every person in their chosen loadouts. And then there are other things weighing the match when everyone calls in a Titan. So rather than simply changing the first game's mechanics, everything I've talked about up until this point changes the feel. It changes the pacing, the variety, and the playing field, but it all feels so different. And this couldn't be any more apparent than in the art style and level design. What a surprise. I will not discuss the ways in which these maps were built around Titan and pilot combat, since I already did, and it's practically just an enhanced deal here. But I do want to look at some standout maps and examine just how different everything really is. Take Angel City. The maps are, again, highly detailed works of art, but now the graphics are less limited, they're more upscale. Everything is a bit brighter and it looks much smoother and more refined than before. But like I said, they are less levels than they are playgrounds. A lot has changed since Titanfall 1, and even a returning map like Angel City sees a lot of significantly different playstyles than it ever did before, when we were still doing the slower, more strategic approach to combat. Now everything is about skill. How experienced are you with the game, the mechanics, and the tools at your disposal? It still is strategic, but as I said, plays with a tight margin of risk assessment. But the maps, old and new, are focused on enhancing your movement and overall flow. They have tons of angles and blind spots, and they break the concept of area itself into parts of a whole. I'll mourn the loss of Titanfall 1's best maps that never did make it to the sequel down the road, because I think so many of them would have been an absolute standout feats in this very game. But there's another element of the game in play here that really made me think about and appreciate these maps from a different point of view. That element would be frontier defense. This is nothing new for the series. In fact, its appearance in the first game was a prominent step forward in terms of how we would play. Rather than PvP, it focuses on a true, pure player versus enemy experience. This means no enemy pilots. All of it is run by the computer that's about as predictable as it is straightforward. You fight waves of enemies on a typical PvP map that revolves around you defending the central harvester. So grunts, specters, and AI-controlled titans were coming from all sorts of places around the area, and it was up to you and 3 others to divide and conquer appropriately. That was basically the philosophy of the first game's frontier defense. Plus, you would get a turret you could place basically anywhere between waves, so as there were more and more enemies, you would have more and more ways of handling them depending on how you used your tools. It's just the same idea here, but it's wildly expanded, in like almost everything I was already talking about. Titanfall 2 didn't need to do a whole lot to this formula for it to be successful. It's still a PvE co-op experience. It still uses the ordinary maps and leverages their design both for and against your favor. Reapers appear, stalker enemies replace the suicide specters from before, drones come in and they bug the ever-living shit out of you. It's just a lot, depending on the difficulty. But TF2's approach leverages strategy, teamwork, and long-term survival a little bit differently. Between waves, there's a shop you can buy different things for yourself. Amped weapons, a battery, there are turrets, permanent arc traps, a harvester shield, a nuke that can force another titan to explode. So you don't only have to decide, what will I buy? But you must also consider, where will it go? Or when will I use it? How will I go about doing that without dying? All of these points contribute to the success of Frontier Defense. It all plays so differently from a regular match. It already feels so different from what felt so different. And for someone who's played a shitload of Destiny in the last 10 years, I can tell you very confidently that it's both a ton of fun, yet it's very easy to get wrapped up or overwhelmed. It's completely notable on its own for how it offers a Titanfall-focused experience that carries the same thrill as its regular PvP without being PvP. I wanted to make a prominent note on it for its importance to the health and the variety of the game thus far, but also to impart a side note. Frontier Defense was part of a DLC for Titanfall 2, which, unlike the first, was all free. Because all in all, pound for pound, TF2 offers a fair and legitimately engaging unique shooter experience. One that finds balance in being so unique, so unlike anything else, unlike even the first. And as far as I have seen, no other game has really pulled this kind of game off, which is sad because Titanfall as a series is on the downward slope of decline, of neglect. These are such prominent shooters that even I was fooled into thinking it would be around forever. And it won't. But why is that? Well, now we have to talk menus. Now, I need you to know, menu design is not why Titanfall was left behind, not even close. But there's a particular aspect of something within these menus that I can point to and go, this is where we fucked up. Titanfall's menus have always given me a very specific feeling. I'm not really sure how to put it to words. I loved the straightforward yet advanced attitude of the original. Everything is in its rightful place, and it's just another element that lends to the science fiction realism that the first game was seeking. However, Titanfall 2 was more conceptualized around the idea of science fantasy, kind of foregoing the grit and realism of the game prior in exchange for a more futuristic, water-like aesthetic and concept. The design choice of the second game's menu is much less straightforward. Almost cluttered, it's laid out weird, yet it's so charming all the same. Menu options are grouped up more than ever, titans, pilots, etc. Because there are true and proper factions in Titanfall 2, there is an area dedicated to that. These factions grant you specific yet random gifts when leveling up, through the use of an in-game mailbox where you receive advocate gifts. These can be anything from emblems, calling cards, and camos. It feels like there are 100 million different ways to customize things in TF2, and that's something I love about it. Just a pilot, for example, can customize their skin, their weapon skins, and add a pro screen to guns just to show off how much you play. Titans can customize their nose plates, their skins, their weapon camo. There is just so much you can do. But there is another aspect of customization within these menus that I will attribute to not the reason that Titanfall fell as a franchise, but the slip of Titanfall as a franchise. The cosmetic shop. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the cosmetics in Titanfall 2. I mean, who doesn't? But these are things that you would buy with real money. And really, comparing these to other modern free-to-play games or even full-price games like Call of Duty, these are nothing compared to how the market for cosmetics is now. The market is absolutely outrageous. Apex is especially bad. Some of this stuff can cost up to $40 or $50 fucking dollars. So yeah, these here aren't so bad. You can buy especially unique weapon skins from different packs. You can spend money on Prime Titans to show off how much do you like that Titan, I guess. And then there's a little thing to buy every unlock in the game. So yeah, here it is. Like I said, DLC was free, there weren't loot boxes or anything, it was pretty straightforward. The store was just there if you wanted it. And I just said it, I love cosmetics, but I don't love the omen of things to come. The store in this game was pretty unintrusive. It wasn't in your face. You could happily and healthily ignore it altogether because it doesn't do anything to alter or change the Titanfall experience. I think the developer, Respawn, and its publisher, which comes into play here soon, EA, looked at this and said, wow, what if we did a whole game out of this? What if it was like this, but always? Titanfall 2's cosmetic store was a small experiment, but someone out there saw dollar signs. And this is where we segue into the downfall of the series as a whole. On November 7th, 2017, the massive publishing company EA, also known for Battlefield, The Sims, Mass Effect, and how they've handled them through the years, Anthem, cough cough, announced an agreement to fully acquire Respawn Entertainment. While EA partnered with Respawn before, Respawn was mostly independent, so EA was just there for funding and publishing purposes. But on December 1st of 2017, the acquisition was finalized, and EA would technically own Respawn. Why did they make this move? Well, according to Ars Technica, it was a move made in response to another game publisher, Nexon, making a bid to formally buy Respawn outright. This publisher was already connected to Respawn as well. They were responsible for publishing the now cancelled or discontinued games such as Titanfall Frontline, Titanfall Online, and Titanfall Assault. Kotaku, citing sources close to the matter, claimed that Nexon had bid over $400 million to buy Respawn outright. EA exercised its contractual right to match the offer, and they ultimately outbid Nexon. And from what I've read, the Respawn co-founders were happy with this at the time. They've been working with EA for quite a while at this point, and they felt like the partnership deal from before lent them the freedom and independence to do whatever they wanted. But this buyout apparently included the rights to a few things, namely, in our case, Titanfall 3. But something else was going on behind the scenes. Initial design on a new Titanfall structured game had started in 2016 before TF2's release. Real work did not begin until spring of 2017 before the buyout. By 2018, post-buyout, the entire development studio was working on this. Approximately 115 developers were on this new project, compared to the 85 or so people that worked on Titanfall 2. As a side note, the free-to-play Battle Royale Fortnite launched in September of 2017. It had such a strong grip on the free-to-play and Battle Royale genres that other games like PUBG and whatever their competitors were there, it was basically PUBG, it was just barely able to even compete with it. Fortnite was massive. Why do I bring up Fortnite? Well, on February 4th, 2019, Respawn stealth dropped a new game, Apex Legends. They literally just released it with no warning, except for a trailer that came out the very same minute that the game released. Apex itself was another free-to-play, Battle Royale style game that actually has so much going for it, and I'll cover that. It's important to remember that Titanfall was a feat of innovation over the shooter genre, but Apex itself was a Titanfall-like game that sought to compete with a whole new genre. Wow, why did we do that? Well, Apex hardly needs an introduction, even if you haven't played it, so I won't even bother explaining the game itself, but you must know this was a direct byproduct of Titanfall. Or rather, Titanfall was repurposed to make this hero-based battle royale. This game basically stripped a hell of a lot of aspects from both Titanfall games, but the formula itself was remodeled almost beyond recognition. It took so many weapons, like the double take, which is now the triple take. The R201 became the R301. The charge rifle is a sniper, etc., etc. Map aesthetics are same but different. They're kind of balanced differently because wall running and double jumping were cut. King's Canyon had these dinosaur things that came right from a map in Titanfall 1. There are a variety of environments across all of the maps in this game that sort of mimic the environments from maps in Titanfall games. And they're all Titanfall themed. Even the overall movement philosophy was lifted. So were the combat mechanics, so was the lore. However, I must make it extraordinarily clear that Apex Legends is not a Titanfall game. Not a competitor, not a sequel, not a substitute. Rather, Apex was allowed to pick and choose what it wanted from the carcass. And even if it does honor a lot of things from Titanfall, it does not honor Titanfall. I want to get it right out of the way that I do not hate Apex as an idea. I've been playing this game basically since release with very long breaks in between. So this gameplay is from my first ever sitting in basically like 2 years. Maybe I came up with this idea for this video last time I played Apex. But I will not pretend that Apex is uninteresting or bad or unfun. I just hate what this game did for the other two that I've been talking about all this time. And there are 2 reasons for that. 1, Apex replaced Titanfall. 2, Apex does not play like Titanfall. I shouldn't even have to explain this one. When we get into my Where Are They Now segment, you'll see just what happened to TF after the years of Apex rolled by. And secondly, no, this is not better. So basically where this game pulls from its roots, it's still a massive online focused experience. It used to be only a battle royale, but then there was a 3v3 game mode which was cut. Now there's control, and there's like 1 or 2 other things, so I guess there are options, but the philosophy kind of shifted away from the solo-oriented team play that the other games boasted. And sure, like I said, you were on teams in Titanfall, your teamwork mattered. But as I said, there was so much going on that, yes, help your teammates, do what you can, but also try not to die. You really had to do a lot to look out for yourself. So of course, then you're going in with a team of 3 people that you need to rely on. And it feels like it goes one way or the other sometimes. Someone will drop somewhere else, solo, immediately get into a fight and leave when they die. That was literally my first match back. Of course, it's the result of a dumbass teammate, but sometimes I feel like I have to play for people. This wasn't exactly the case before, not because everyone was so great at Titanfall, but really because you had to focus so much on yourself and what was going on around you. And also, you weren't out if you died, so whatever then. While Apex does mimic Titanfall's high-risk, high-reward gameplay, it does it extremely loosely. Because of course, it almost mimics the other Battle Royale style games. No loadout this time, instead you look for different weapons on the ground and in boxes. You look for weapon attachments, weapon ammo, backpacks, shields. There's just so much I can't even get the words right. Then, of course, this is a massively full lobby completely devoid of any AI combatants. It doesn't resemble a large-scale war full of action and chaos. Rather, it fills the world with other teams and puts them head-to-head. So instead, it feels like one large arena or coliseum, which really is the vision Apex was going for. But the terms of risk and reward are inherently different. It pulls strings labeled tension and reflex with alternative intentions in mind. Gone are the Titans. Gone is the grit and aesthetic from before, no wall running. You're just being teased Titanfall this whole time, like through the different characters and the story that's happening and through the maps and through the weapons and through literally everything. I'm being edged on Titanfall and I'm not getting any Titanfall. It is so fucking frustrating to play Apex and go like, oh my god, Valkyrie is Viper's daughter. Who gives a shit? You know what I mean? Anyways, I'm gonna go off the rails if I keep going this way. They clearly had a vision for this game, and over the years that vision has evolved into something else entirely. But while it does its own thing, and very well I might add, it abandoned what made Titanfall unique. It's a totally different experience. Not being Titanfall isn't a valid criticism on its own, but it is when I plug the other reason. Apex replaced Titanfall. How? Apex is a completely free-to-play game. Instead of buying it outright, it's free. They make money primarily from cosmetics, from characters and weapon skins, emotes, stickers, finishers, and oh boy, the loot box. At this point in Apex's lifetime, there is almost no end to the sheer amount of volume in the ocean of cosmetics that are currently around. Furthermore, Apex's free-to-play model completely changed Respawn/EA's priority. Success from this game was immediate. Apex Legends surpassed 25 million players by the end of its first week and 50 million within its first month. By April 2021, it had 100 million players, making it one of the most played video games of all time by player count. Titanfall never saw these numbers. It never saw out the door success like this. Apex just saw far more players, and it was genuine competition for the other major names in the game, i.e. Fortnite. That game almost felt like it would never be dethroned. But with all these new players, a lot of them were spending at least some money, probably on passes and whatnot, with a heavy margin of hardcore players spending so much more. I can speak to this very personally too. I have a treasure hoard of skins from just over the years. I bought a ton, especially from the time when I couldn't stop playing Loba Cheeks. If I had to guess, I spent somewhere between $300 and $500 on this game, especially during the time of my life where I was spending actual money on cosmetics. And this Bloodhound heirloom that I'm showing off because, yeah, I have an heirloom, was, at least for the time, extremely rare to get. You had to open a shit ton of loot boxes, and I think the chance to get the, shards for the heirloom, the axe that he's carrying in his hand, was I don't want to say 1%, but it was ridiculously small. So, of course, I just happened to get this heirloom box on my 19th birthday, almost 5 years ago. So of course, as if loot boxes couldn't become more popular, there was just so much more of a reason to buy them in bulk for the people who really wanted those skins and they had the money to burn. And don't get me wrong here, I love my skins, I love showing off, but holy shit, that's all Apex will ever sell. It's skins, premium passes, $40 skin packs, $20 character skins, skins. Titanfall 2 made somewhere in the mid to high 100 millions in terms of revenue. As of May 2024, Apex made over 3 billion with a B. But skins are all Apex is ever going to sell. I guess it's all ever needs to sell. You know what Titanfall sold? It sold games, and ultimately an entire experience. A beautiful, unforgettable, and might I say, unrepeatable experience. One that Apex still can't hold a candle to. One that I've spent maybe the last 60 hours of my life on translating into a video essay. Apex will only ever sell skins, now and forever. It's this money printing that locked the Respawn developers into Apex, maybe until the end of time. Why do another Titanfall when Apex makes money? Wait, you remember what I said earlier? EA acquired the rights to Titanfall 3? Well then what the fuck happened? This. I mean, by God. When Apex first came around, I thought, this is cool. Maybe it'll get more people into Titanfall. Maybe we'll get Titanfall 3. I have to stop saying that word followed by the number 3 or I'll go fucking crazy. I forgot to take my crazy pills. Let's be clear. Apex's future and success did away with any need to do Titanfall 3. Titanfall 3 will never ever be greenlit by EA, who now gets to own and control and tell Respawn what to do, while Apex still dominates. I mean, why? It's just, from a financial sense, it's cut and dry for them. EA's ownership of Respawn was a catalyst for Titanfall's neglect. This game was so good from a capitalist standpoint that there really was no point in quote-unquote wasting money on a new Titanfall that was just going to possibly, maybe, probably underperform Apex anyways. But who really knows? From an artist's standpoint, this is a travesty. Because of Respawn's extremely narrow focus on Apex and only Apex, Titanfall began to fall behind just a year after this game launched. Servers were crashing and they were full of hackers with no fixes, no new updates, no content, no promotion, or none that worked, as we will see. Titanfall became a fucking relic. But do you know who's still playing Titanfall instead of Apex? All of the people that were playing Titanfall before. People that actually played and got into this game, simply because this is ultimately the best experience. This is all some of us want. But it's falling into the past faster and faster each day, while Apex is on season 100 million with no end in sight. Remember, Titanfall was innovation, Apex was adaptation, and one was left behind. This wasn't an essay on Apex, it was about Titanfall, and I'd really rather get back to that. This is the Where Are They Now segment, i.e. the My Feelings chapter, but it's also chock full of crazy Jake magic that you all know so well. If you made it this far for some reason, let's get back to talking about my favorite games. Sometime after Titanfall 2's release in 2016, it became rather obvious to some original Titanfall fans that maybe the first game was really being left behind, or replaced. Seems Respawn has a track record. TF1 still had a more populated core player base, but it was effectively superseded by Titanfall 2. I know it's been a while since I've discussed the first game, but there were some discrepancies between the formula of both games. In other words, there's a reason why so many people love the first game more, and I'm with them. The first game is my favorite, even if I think the second is the quote-unquote best for obvious reasons. But Titanfall 2 definitely took a different direction than the first game. I see Titanfall 1 as such a well thought out and considerably crafted experience. The second one, look, I love Titanfall 2. I know someday, when the first game disappears, we will have Titanfall 2. For a long time. And I've come to terms with that. But the difference with the second game is that it was engineered to try and draw in a larger audience, and part of how it did that was by just dumbing down certain aspects from the first, if not trading them altogether. The story was simplified and less thrilling overall, gameplay was faster, Titans were sorted into more classes, yada yada yada. Like, this was definitely more ambitious than the first, and I really appreciate where it's coming from. But there's an arcadey feel to the sequel that smudges the immersion of its predecessor. It feels like the realism was kind of stripped away to tell a more science fantasy story over the previous science fiction. That is exactly what led to the creation of Apex and all of this nonsense that now exists. And I don't think there's anything very wrong with 2. I like exactly where Titanfall 2 is at and what it does, but the release of TF2, which, hey, was pinched in a week before Battlefield and COD Infinite Warfare in what was like essentially a dick showing contest, just caused it to be choked out in the market. And it ultimately ended up getting mixed in with what was an oversaturation of shooter games, some of which were just more popular than Titanfall, plain and simple. And even though Titanfall 2 does well for itself, more on that in a bit, its launch success and all of these other reasons basically guarantee that we would never see another grounded, gritty, realistic experience like Titanfall 1 ever again. To make matters worse, the original game started suffering DDoS attacks and server hacks shortly after the second game came out, on and off. It wasn't until late 2020 that things would begin to get so much worse for it. And around November 2020, Titanfall 1 saw an official launch on PC platforms, Steam and Origin. It was thought by a lot of us that Titanfall would see a resurgence in its player base, and to an extent that was true. And by extent, I mean if it was even playable. Titanfall 1's servers were pretty flimsy in terms of security, and because Respawn was just moving on every time a new game came out, they weren't looking back and trying to patch up all these things. These servers were undergoing crazy problems. And by 2020, it was already receiving bare bones server maintenance in the middle of crashes and hackings, to say the least. When it did release on Steam, the game was fine for all of 2 weeks before the DDoS attacks started again. Actual lack of support from Respawn, other than here's TF1 on PC, bye, caused the Steam page to receive an overwhelmingly negative rating. A desperate cry for Respawn from fans to come in and just save this thing. And unfortunately, nothing came of it. And then on July 4th, 2021, Respawn's servers for both Titanfall and Titanfall 2 suffered a crippling DDoS attack. One that rendered both games completely unplayable, save for, Titanfall 2's story mode. But this same group took control of Apex Legends servers a little bit earlier, who then left end-of-game messages begging for Respawn to save Titanfall. All this did was urge Respawn devs to restore Apex to its original state, and then they shipped updates out for Titanfall, and the original game's servers came back for a very brief time. However, with constant DDoS attacks and miscellaneous crashes, Titanfall 1 was just removed from all storefronts on March 1st, 2022. Rather than fix the issue, someone decided it best to get rid of it and sweep it under the rug altogether. So why was all of this happening? Well, at some point, a Respawn community coordinator revealed that out of all the people at Respawn that were, currently working, only 2 people were working on the server broken status thing for Titanfall 1 and 2, and every single other person was on Apex. Okay? And second of all, there was this one, I think it was a Reddit user or something like that. Someone reverse engineered Titanfall, like truly reverse engineered like the code and the writing and how the servers worked and everything. And they made a list of here's 8 things to do and the exact specific instructions way to do it. And you need to do these 8 things and you'll fix Titanfall 1 servers forever. And this was before Titanfall 1 got pulled from the storefronts. And I don't know if they really ever did anything. I mean, Titanfall 1 still works these days. The servers themselves were never taken down. They were actually fixed. So I don't know if that was due to the guy or whatever, but it's kind of funny. It's just weird because after it was removed from stores, we never saw it sold again. You can still run it on an Xbox if you have the original disc, which I do from 2014. And PC players can spend $20 if they search how to get Titanfall 1 2025 Reddit. I'm not kidding, you should get it. While the Xbox and unmodded PC versions still claim there's 0 players worldwide, I can say very confidently that's just a bug. There's a server status page that shows true numbers. And to be honest, the player count is really only as good as I would have hoped it would be. While I can only see PC numbers on here, Reddit users and even this page itself claim that the Xbox edition is plenty populated, and the PC servers have seen, get this, 500 different individuals within the last 7 days at my time of speaking. 124 players were on in the last 24 hours. I don't know how those numbers sound to you, but they're damn hopeful to me. Of course, it's a drop in the bucket in comparison to the total player tracker with 1.8 million players since 2017. and there were like the 10 million players from before, but this should be enough usually. However, when I first installed it on my PC and then logged in for some footage, I didn't really see anyone. There were 3 players online and I was one of them. I booted up Frontier Defense and I just waited, hoping and praying that I would get somewhere. But the lobby sat empty for a long time. Just me, staring at the screen, contemplating on how I used to look at the exact same screen when I was 13. After a while, a max level player joined the lobby, and I think both of us just sat there, staring at our screens going, holy shit, I found someone. Any prayer I had of it letting us start a game with only 2 people was unfounded because we just sat there. And so, with nothing else to do, we talked. We reminisced on what this game used to be. We lamented this empty, playerless space. It felt like he was just as confused as I was, walking through like an abandoned theme park, thinking, where did all the people go? Where are the people? This place was meant for people to come and have fun together, to share a momentous and valuable experience together. It was meant for people, and now it's empty. And that's a really, really hard pill for me to swallow. It's like the sole reason why I even wrote this damn thing in the first place. You know, call it nostalgia or growing up, but I know some people that really loved this game. I think it captures this very specific feeling from the era in my life when this kind of game was popular. That's such a rare thing, you see. If there's anything I've learned about humanity as a whole, it's that we place so much fucking value in personal memory, and how things were and how they felt to us back when growing older was less of a curse than we realize it is nowadays. But we don't always recognize that in the moment, do we? Like, you know, as the moment's happening or as we fall asleep, we comb over so many things that we never really consciously think about again until you come back so much later and it hits you in the face. And time slows down just enough to give you a minute of profound memory. Yes, this is what I remember. I remember it so well. How on earth did I forget about this? I think that's why this game went out the way it did. Maybe Respawn, someone was missing out on just how fucking good we had it. And from there, it just fell behind in favor of Titanfall 2. And when Apex replaced that, it became obvious to everyone who still loved this game 2 generations behind that Respawn was moving on. This just wasn't important to them like it was to us. Their favorite game had an expiration date, and between the hackings and the crashings, it didn't seem to matter that much in the first place. If you didn't notice, I didn't really talk about DLC maps much, or show much from Frontier Defense, or describe just how fucking cool all that stuff is because I can't play these. There aren't people on for me to play these. It's hard enough to find footage as it is. It's like pulling teeth with a rock just trying to find one match of attrition. The only footage I have is from when I found like 4 or 5 other people playing this game at like 11 a.m. Eastern time. That's how hard it is to even cover this game now. And it really fucking hurts me to know that this is the case. That at some point we have to move on from this because I realize how far behind me those days are. I'm no longer 13, home for summer vacation. I remember I used to make these shitty lemonade drinks. I used to take this glass like quart jar and I would stir like a spoonful of sugar in with the water. And then I'd drop a slice of lemon and take some mint from the garden and I would just put it right in there. Raw, baby. That was a good summer. Back when you could still be a kid and nobody would judge you for it. When being a kid meant making shitty drinks for yourself. They were so awful. But I loved them at the time. And I remember them so vividly because I used to play Titanfall when I was drinking them. That's how much I loved this game. I remember sitting shirtless in my living room, balls to the walls New York summer, sipping mediocre lemon water playing this fucking game. And look what it's come to. Over the years, I've watched helplessly as I got to witness the slow, torturous suffocation of something I so loved. And really what it comes down to for me is I think Titanfall 1 was just so near perfect. The movements, the fights, and definitely the art style. I mean, look at Rise between its appearance in the first and second game. I totally love the graphic style of the first. I know I've said that before, but it's one of the things that sends me. I wish everyone could log into a well-populated server at any time of day and witness it for yourself. Unfortunately, between the online only and always looking to the future, this game wasn't exactly engineered with survival in mind, even if it somehow is barely clinging on. So I guess it's only right that this game sits in the low population purgatory. At least I can play this game. At least there are times when people will be playing the game. Because being able to play at specific times is better than never being able to play. I'll take it. But it's somber to me because I do realize now that either Titanfall will face a final death in my lifetime, or I'll have moved on so far that I forgot about this game entirely. And to tell you the truth, I don't know which one scares me more. But maybe that's part of this growing up thing people keep telling me about. I don't know. I can't take it, so I wrote a 40 fucking page essay on these games. Hooray. In terms of Titanfall 2, I guess the picture is brighter, even if it's not all suns and rainbows. Let's pick back up on the 2021 DDoS attacks. At first, when these were happening, the server crashes were only an issue on console, but then it made its way to PC. The issues were so bad that several months later, when Titanfall 2 was still completely unplayable, some random chap off the sidewalk created the North Star server, which essentially bypassed the original servers and by extension the hacking. For a long time, the only way to really play Titanfall was to use the North Star servers on a PC copy of the game, and in essence, the wide and loyal core Titanfall fanbase as a whole was cut off from the two games entirely, driving the remainder of dedicated players towards a fucking fan server on one game, on one system if they even had it. To speak on the hacking and what I understand about it, Respawn's neglect of the Titanfall franchise as they narrowed down on the Apex Legends caused a lot of uproar. It's not like these were nothing games that no one knew about, so as you can imagine, I sympathize with this cause. This neglect, combined with an apparent menagerie of security exploits, caused some people with some computer know-how to really stick it to Respawn and just barrage their servers. These guys claimed it was for the good of the game, but it just locked everyone out, effectively killing it. During the general DDoS attacks, Respawn Community Coordinator revealed that, oh, I said this earlier, there were only 2 people working on the DDoS attacks. That just fueled the fire, that pissed fans off, it caused more hacking, which infuriated the fanbase even more, because there isn't just like one thing to be mad at, now everyone's in on it. Thankfully, even if it took years, the servers came back in 2023. Titanfall 2 still sees players, it sees actions, it sees sales. It's always funny how the server numbers spike to like 6,000 or 7,000 players after a Titanfall 2 sale, and then it goes to 5, and then 3, and 2. But Titanfall 2 still does well enough for itself, well enough to survive, even if it's not by a lot. I typically end up waiting a good 5 minutes for a match these days, but this game is so good that I don't mind waiting just 5 minutes. The longest wait time I've seen was 15, but usually the servers have anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 people on it, and it only takes 12 people to make a match, or 4 people for Frontier Defense. So it's pretty safe to say that Titanfall is just as alive as it'll ever be. In a state that still makes it worth buying and playing, at least now. I'm glad we're out of the DDoS days because I was really worrying for the franchise's future. I know I spilt about Titanfall 1, but I can say pretty confidently that I don't think Titanfall 2 will go anywhere for a while, pending new hacks and whatnot. I think it's sad that it's not the same popular game I was playing in high school, but it's fair. I'm not 15 anymore, this game is still around, so if it feels like I've aged, at least this game is aging with me. At least I can actually play this one. Let me get a little rant in, just an end of essay rant, and it'll be interesting, I promise. Titanfall sees a lot of Titanfall related games, and even new entries, hint hint, that just got cancelled or taken down. This was true of Titanfall Assault, which was a pretty goated mobile game that ran for less than a year before getting shut down. This was true of Titanfall Frontline, a Hearthstone-style game featuring burn cards, which was cancelled before release. This even happened to Titanfall Online, a, from what I understand, free-to-play version of the first game. It was kind of marketed towards, like, Korea and China. And this was even true of, get this, an unannounced Titanfall Apex Legends single-player crossover, which was cancelled before the fucking announcement. Not even a Titanfall crossover for the game they like to make more. And it feels like every time Respawn dips its toe in the water, kind of prodding at how this series might do, like when they launched TF1 on PC, it just fails. Because they never gave it the proper time and respect to even pull off something like a PC release. So every time they maybe want to try something again, Titanfall just keeps getting cut down. And the second game is all we really truly have now. If we never get a third game, which I could bet my life on, then this is all we have. That's why it feels so important to me that this game stays alive, that people know about it, why I want people to take part, so we can keep the memory alive. That's why I'm talking about these stupid games in 2025, because they're good. I can't get enough of them. It's still a whole lot of fun, and if you somehow made it this far and you've never played Titanfall, I implore you to try it if you have the means. You can still get the first game on PC pretty easy. The second game sells on all platforms minus Nintendo for like dirt cheap every now and then, so really get on it while it's here. Acceptance as a member of the core fanbase is almost cult-like. These are some extremely loyal and fun folks that foster all of these new players into their following, because Titanfall is irreplaceable despite what developers think. There will never be a game that does Titanfall in the way that Titanfall did Titanfall. And if we're never getting a third game, which, let me pivot, I really do think that we fell into a dark future, because back in its heyday, we were all thinking like, what will Titanfall 3 be like? And Respawn said, Apex Legends, and we were all like, cool, now what's going to happen with Titanfall 3? And they never spoke to us again. That's basically what happened. I don't know where down this pipeline of events, Titanfall suddenly became cringe, very genuinely. I don't know that someone could possibly think of Titanfall in such a negative way where they see it as inferior to the free-to-play game that came after it. And I know Apex makes more money, Apex has more players, because it's fucking free-to-play. It splashed next to Fortnite. Of course it did better. God forbid we make a good game with a dedicated art style and we stick with it. I'll be that guy. I don't even care. Not everything we used to make was good, but we used to make art. When was the last time you had a AAA shooter game that was just art? Now everything is fucking cosmetics in the store and the pass, the battle pass, the premium pass, the events and free to play because you just can't beat it. It's free cash at some point. I'm sick of it. When Apex first came around, I remember thinking at the time, oh, this is like Titanfall Lite. Titanfall if it were a free-to-play battle royale. Like, yeah, it has really cool nods to Titanfall. It essentially mimics it without actually being it. It's fun for a minute, but it really makes me want to play Titanfall, so I'll go play that instead. I think a lot of us were hoping that would make a lot of new players more interested in Titanfall 2, and in turn we would get TF3. That's not what happened. Apex just did so good they decided to keep doing Apex. Forever. I didn't even want to give Apex any runtime in this segment, but I did it on accident because that's how much I fucking hate this game. It took everything Titanfall did and it buried it, actively replaced it. In my eyes, it got in the way of what we had. I think a lot of Titanfall players would agree that this is better than Apex. I think a lot of us would agree that Apex is like a thing that happened, or an embarrassment. And I can speak very personally when I say whatever happened with Apex is the reason I keep playing Titanfall. It's when I realized maybe you can't do better than this. Maybe this just can't be beat. Nothing is quite like Titanfall. And the more I think about it, the better I feel. Especially nowadays, who knows when it'll go down again and if it'll be for good. What kills me too is, I think I spoke on this in a Patreon blog a little bit. I get this like urge to window shop for games. You know, I used to have an Xbox. I use my PC here and there because it's just old. And within the last year, I obtained a PS5. So I've been buying a few games here and there, but I kind of stick exclusively to sales. Some of the games of which I buy on sales that I don't play. But I get this craving to shop for deals. But when the deals are good, I tend to fantasize about playing some game again because it's cheap and I'll probably want it again someday when it's not on sale. I used to buy a lot of these and they sat untouched in my Xbox library, literally forever. So these days I tend to sober up and I move on. Some other games still get me. I bought the RE2 remake for 10 shells on my PS5 last week, so now I own it on all platforms. I'm actually playing it, so I guess it's fine, but I also have days where no game seems enough for me. Like I just sit down and I don't want to play anything. And every single time that happens, I go, wow, it's been a long time since I've played Titanfall 2. Let's go do that again. And I always have fun. I always have a great time. I hang on to it for a couple months and then I move on, and maybe I'm doomed to repeat that cycle. I get it. But also, Titanfall 2 is really the only game I even care about playing these days. Why am I buying all these other games to distract myself when this game has been staring at me from my library for as long as I can remember? It makes me worry that someday I'll move on from Titanfall 2 as well. Though I know this is just might not be as realistic as my fears about the first game. It's just absolutely insane to me that I keep ignoring the best thing I can think of. Anyway, I hope this sheds some light on Titanfall as a series, and if I don't inspire you to take part in it while you still can, then I hope you're already a pilot. That's the only excuse. I don't want to make this about me hating Apex even if it's true, because really this is just the situation. No amount of being mad at it is going to undo the things that have already happened, I get that. But hating on it fuels my fire for Titanfall, so I'm kind of in this perpetual loop, I guess. So long as I live, I will play these games, or I'm going to die trying. I'll never forget the impact these games have had in my life and the vivid memories I've made with them. I know I'm not alone in this. There are so many people that feel the way I do. I love Titanfall. I know I'm not alone. The words I'm about to leave you with aren't mine, but the burden of Titanfall's survival falls into every single one of us that keeps this game alive. This love is a collective love, manifesting itself differently in everyone, sure, but it's because of everyone that makes the burden feel easier. The collective burns so bright. We're all we've got. So I will leave you with a few words from the priest from the wedding scene in one of my favorite TV shows, Fleabag. This one is for us, for a hell of a ride, and for the very games I cherish so much. Love is awful. It's awful. It's painful. It's frightening. It makes you doubt yourself, judge yourself, distance yourself from other people in your life. It makes you selfish. It makes you creepy, makes you obsessed with your hair, makes you cruel, makes you say and do things you never thought you would do. It's all any of us want, and it's hell when we get there. So no wonder it's something we don't want to do on our own. I was taught if we're born with love, then life is about choosing the right place to put it. People talk about that a lot, feeling right. When it feels right, it's easy. But I'm not sure that's true. It takes strength to know what's right. And love isn't something that weak people do. Being a romantic takes a hell of a lot of hope. I think what they mean is, when you find somebody that you love, it feels like hope.